The Giants needed a win in the worst possible way after dropping 2 in Detroit, not playing a third because of a rainout, and then dropping the first 2 in Miami. These are series you should be winning, and the Giants were in danger of going winless on the trip. But today, they fought, they grinded, they had some difficult moments, but they ultimately prevailed. It was a huge win for the Giants as they now fly all the way across the country, no days off, and begin a difficult homestand.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And where we get started is with the Giants overcoming adversity. I mean, sooner or later, they were bound to win a baseball game. It is just, on the one hand, I want to say it's just not that hard. On the other hand, it is that hard. The major leagues are like the toughest sport in sports for me. But at the same time, any given day, any team can beat any other team. But right now, on any given day, it felt like the Giants could not win a game. They fell to 5-11 after their loss last night. And thankfully, day game today allowed me to not have to talk about last night's game exclusively. We were going to wait until this game got played, hoping we weren't going to be discussing a 3-game sweep in Miami. And sure enough, the Giants got the job done. They made the pitch when they needed to make the pitch. And, you know, in extra innings, they finally broke through. That has been a theme. If you think about in Detroit, the 2 games in Detroit, both games went 11 innings. And then today's game goes 11 innings. And so for the Giants, that's 6 extra inning frames, each of which you get an automatic runner on second base to start the inning. And so before the top of the 11th here, the Giants had put together a measly 1 run in, 5 chances in extra innings? 2, 4, 5. 5 times they had a leadoff double, essentially, and the most they could get was 1 run in those situations. I could be misremembering that a little bit. I'm just going off memory here. But that just kind of speaks to what's been going on with this team. It was a familiar trend last night in their loss in that, early runs, taking a lead, and then not continuing to add on, and then allowing the opponent to creep back into the game, overtake you, and then just not being able to come back yourselves. And so that is a losing formula, and hence the Giants were 5-11, one of the worst records in the league. And so it's baseball. Stuff like this does happen over short periods of time, but at the same time, no excuses. You've just got to right the ship, go out there and win that next day's game. And this game was so important for me today. You just don't want to go winless on this road trip and then get on a plane and have a 6-hour flight home and then start a homestand in which you're going to face some good teams. The Cardinals and the Mets coming into town, 2 likely playoff teams, although the Cardinals have had their struggles as well, not quite on the level yet. I mean, they started off even poorer than the Giants, but then they've kind of turned it around a little bit in the last few days, whereas the Giants just kept scuffling. But the Cardinals have also had their difficulties. But anyway, getting into this game, I mean, like I said, they made the pitch when they needed to, and that's something that has been missing. Like Camilo Doval, this game could have been over in the bottom of the 10th because once again, the Giants had an extra inning frame in which they were the road team and they couldn't push a run across. You get that automatic runner on second, and I'm not going to be the one to say, bunt that guy over. I just think it's a bad idea, especially maybe if you're the home team and the visitors have not scored and all you're playing for is one run. But when you're the road team, one run may not be enough. And here's the thing about bunting. Guys do not always get the bunt down. If a bunt meant I can just tell you I want to sacrifice an out and we're going to move that runner to third, that's a different story than attempting a bunt, because you do not always get the bunt down. Sometimes you get the bunt down and they throw the guy out at third. Sometimes you get the bunt down, the guy can't advance and they throw you out at first. Sometimes you strike out on a bunt. Sometimes you pop it up. Sometimes you fail on 2 bunt attempts, put yourself in an 0-2 count, then you swing the bat, and then you're behind in the count 0-2, and it leads to a much poorer outcome because you put yourself in an 0-2 hole. And so I am not a proponent of sacrifice bunting in that situation. So it's not about that, but oftentimes it is about the strikeout. Like in certain situations, like runner on second, nobody out, those are the situations in which you really just do want to put the ball in play, hit a deep enough fly ball where you can advance that guy to third, or simply hit a ground ball to the right side that advances that guy to third. And the Giants, in those types of situations, we are talking about now 17 games. And so it's not something where I would just look at this and say, the Giants can't play this way. They just are fundamentally incapable of playing that kind of baseball, and it's going to lead to losing. I'm just not going to write them off like that based on 17 games. And what the Giants can do, I've been thinking the last few days, man, early talk, the Giants are too reliant on home runs. I would have loved to be reliant on some home runs in some of these last few games. The home runs just weren't there, and neither were the runs. And today, that changed. How did the Giants get 4 runs in the top of the 11th? It wasn't by bunting guys over. It was by 2 home runs, including off the bat of Michael Conforto and also Mike Yastrzemski later in the inning. But I think it was the same story, or maybe they did move that guy up to third base with 1 out. I can't remember if the runner was still on second or on third when Conforto came up, but left on left, he had pinch hit earlier in the game, so this was his second plate appearance. Man, they need this guy, and he has come up now with 2 of the clutchest home runs of the season. The Giants only have 6 wins, and he is responsible kind of for a couple of them with big home runs late in the game. And so they need this guy, and they need not just him, but they need Mitch Haniger, they need Joc Pederson, and they need Austin Slater, because it's not just not having those guys in the starting lineup. It has a ripple effect through the whole roster, and you're seeing a lot of matchups that they wouldn't normally put out there because of these injuries. And so we're hearing good news on Michael Conforto. We're hearing good news on Austin Slater and Mitch Haniger. And so I'm really optimistic about what that could mean for the Giants moving forward. So coming up in just a minute, I want to kind of look ahead to what is this team going to look like with those guys in it? What does it change? What does it allow them to do that right now they haven't been able to do? So big series, every game is huge, and especially when you're just really scuffling early, it is important to get it going. And so this was a huge win in Miami. And so we'll talk about all of that in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team is all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors like I've done myself countless times. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. All right, as promised, more about just the state of the San Francisco Giants and how it's hopefully turning around with some of the these are some key players that they're missing, and their depth has been tested. I would say it's actually impressive, some of the lineups they've been able to put together, despite the fact that they're arguably missing like 3 of their most impactful hitters in Michael Conforto, Joc Pederson, and Mitch Haniger. And then if you're talking about against a left-handed pitcher, just specifically Haniger and Slater, and then against a right-handed pitcher and even a left-handed pitcher as well with Conforto, but also Joc Pederson and Michael Conforto, those are huge bats, way above average bats. And it's not just that you don't have those guys, it's what is the result of not having those guys? What does it look like? And what it's looked like is a lot of the players who happen to be the platoon players on the Giants, those guys, most of them not counting. A lot of their everyday type players have been hurt in Haniger and Conforto. I guess Slater not so much and Joc not so much, but Haniger and Conforto, those are 2 guys who in a perfect world are just kind of in your lineup, in the middle of the lineup every day. We've seen what Conforto can do. Mitch Haniger should be able to do similar damage. I mean, and play solid defense too out there. Blake Sabol, we could do a whole conversation about him. It's just not been working out. I think he, honestly, surprisingly to me, has done better defensively as a catcher than he has in left. I thought he kind of cost them a game potentially with a really bad route he took against a Javier Baez line drive to left field late in a game against the Tigers. Actually want to mention, I really, in hindsight, am thinking, why was Elliot Ramos not substituted out there for Blake Sabol? And part of me wants to answer that by saying Sabol had done a solid job up to that point. We hadn't really seen him have to make a difficult kind of ranging back play like that in a big situation. So it was just kind of bad timing for him to show us that maybe he's not as good as hoped defensively in the outfield. Or I don't know. I saw enough on that play to say this guy is not a great defensive outfielder. And so anyway, we could talk about Sabol and how his status is in jeopardy as he continues to also scuffle at the plate, although he's done a nice job, admittedly, I think, as a catcher defensively. And Joey Bart getting the lion's share of the playing time anyway, and doing a good job too, to his credit. And the more Bart plays and the more he performs, trust me, the more I'll talk about him and give him credit. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be dipping into some mailbag questions. We have a lot left over, not just from the latest round, but from the previous round as well. A lot of really good questions that I desperately want to get into, so the everydayers will hear those on tomorrow's show. The Giants play the Mets tomorrow at 6:45 Pacific. It's going to be Kodai Senga making his debut against the Giants. Kodai Senga with this ghost fork against Sean Manaea. And the Mets, they currently don't have Justin Verlander. They don't. Max Scherzer just came back today, so I don't believe he's going to pitch in this series either. So the Giants catching a break there. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So yes, as I said, I want to get into what it's going to look like when the Giants are able to put their full strength lineup together and how it's going to settle everything down. And I really do believe it reminds me of my complaints about what things were looking like towards the end of the previous regime. I was constantly complaining. As I said in the beginning, I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. So what does that mean? In 15, 16, 17, and 18, I was covering this team, not on Locked on Giants, but with my own kind of independent podcast with co-host Adam Petke. And they were just so often getting like unfavorable matchups at the plate, and I thought it was contributing to their downfall. And it seemed they didn't have any interest in addressing that. Like Denard Span, I mentioned this the other day, but like Clayton Kershaw, one of the best lefties of all time, is on the mound, and you've got left-handed hitters, Denard Span, Joe Panic, Brandon Crawford, Brandon Belt, Pablo Sandoval as a switch hitter, but from his weaker side on the right side. In the lineup, just a bunch of lefties against a really tough lefty, and the Giants didn't score against that guy for like 10 years. Like they just couldn't figure him out. And to me, it was like, you got to be platooning some of these guys. But lately this season, without Conforto and Joc and Haniger and Slater, we're seeing more of that. We're seeing consistent playing time from guys who have a track record of being platoon players for a reason, not just because they like platooning anybody. It's because these guys have huge platoon splits in their careers, like LaMonte Wade Jr., like Joc Pederson, although he's not even in there right now. But Brandon Crawford's at bat quality against left-handed pitching has just been really poor so far this season. He's another example. And then against right-handed pitching, we're seeing the likes of, it's not like I want to take Tyro Estrada or JD Davis out of a game against a righty just because they're right-handed. That is not at all what I'm saying. And especially if you're playing good defense and you're just having good at-bats, keep those guys in there. I am not saying platoon in every position, but guys like David Villar, who yesterday, had one of his worst games ever, just striking out left and right, chasing pitches out of the zone left and right, and facing a right-handed pitcher. And so when you see something like that, it would be nice. Was it today? It was yesterday where he was the DH. And so it's a right-handed pitcher. He's DHing. Imagine if instead of David Villar in those situations, you're able to have Joc Pederson. And then in, left field, you've got Elliot Ramos facing a right-handed pitcher. And that's not ideal. And then, Brett Wisely gets called up and I guess he didn't make the start, but Darren Ruff as the DH against a right-handed pitcher. Actually, you know what? I'm looking at today's lineup and not yesterday's lineup. So I have some of those wrong in terms of when they did it, but we're seeing a lot of it. Like, for example, today, LaMonte Wade Jr. in the lineup, left on left. Mike Yastrzemski in the lineup, left on left. And it's just hurt them. I think that it has hurt them a lot. Conforto not being able to start. The good news is that we heard after the game, this is courtesy of Susan Slusser in the San Francisco Chronicle. I just saw this article of hers after the game, basically that they're saying Michael Conforto is going to be able to DH in the upcoming series against the Mets. And so that makes a big difference for me, especially with them facing, like I said, Kodai Senga, who's a right-handed pitcher in the first game. Looks like it's TBD for the Mets in the second game. And then Pederson, who I believe is a lefty, in the third game. So maybe the first two games, maybe a couple of right-handed pitchers, and just to have Michael Conforto back out there as the DH, I think makes a big difference. And you're able to, that's the thing, is people like complain about the platoons, but when you're seeing the Giants struggling to put runs together, please just notice when the pitcher is left and when the batter is left, and just the difference in the at-bat quality. I think we see it a lot with Mike Yastrzemski. I think we see it with LaMonte Wade Jr. And certainly when Joc Pederson is up there against a lefty, he just looks totally uncomfortable. And so you might not like the platoon, but there's a reason that when guys are healthy and they're able to utilize these platoons, the Giants are a dangerous offensive team. And, I just was pulling up on Twitter some numbers because I saw a note talking about how this year the Giants basically, the point that was made, the insinuation that was made was that basically the Giants have only been a good offensive team because of the one series against the White Sox. But to me, that's cherry picking a little bit because those games count just the same. And we're dealing with a small sample. So if you have a series where you blow up, it counts. You're facing Major League pitching, and it's part of, 17 total games you've played or whatever, 6 and 11, 17 games. You can't just take out their three best games and then expect, I get it though, consistency being key, but also the last several days in all of these losses, remember how consistent run scoring, I'm not talking about inning to inning, but game to game was such a complaint. It was either not 9 runs or 1 run basically in a win versus in a loss. But the last several games, they've been pretty consistent around 4, 5, even 6 runs. The last couple in Miami, not so much until today when they put together 5 runs. It did take 11 innings, but still, through 9 9 innings, they did only have 1 run. I will admit that. But you can't take out the worst stats. And so the numbers that I was looking at, we're going big picture here because that's the thing. People want to react a lot to the short season sample and make points about it. But how about if we just zoom out? And I'm not just going to say, what about 2021 when everything went so well? What if we include 2022 when things didn't go so well? 2023 when things have been up and down and, as you expect in the early season, inconsistent. And what about 2020 when it was a 60-game season? Things got a little weird as well. What if we combine it all? Where do the San Francisco Giants rank offensively? And you might say, whoa, Buster Posey changing that. Well, he was only there for one of those years. Wasn't there in 20, wasn't there in 2022, isn't here in 2023. So how do the overall numbers look for the Giants? We'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by my favorite game, Ultimate Baseball GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming a major league general manager like I have? Because if you have, now is your chance to put those skills to the test. Hiring the right coaches, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing through difficult personalities and injuries, team chemistry, navigating your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. What does that sound like to you? Realistic managing of a major league franchise. And you start off, your team is in a poor position, and you've got to turn that team around. And if you don't do it, you might just get fired. And so how about this? Compete with your friends. See who among you is the best at putting those skills. Like if you think you can do it, put them to the test and compete against your friends and find out for sure and have a ton of fun doing it the whole time. Locked On Giants listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, here we go. I want to discuss the overall offense for the San Francisco Giants because people, they kind of give me a hard time or push back when I try to make cases about the 2023 season and the numbers that I'm seeing. So it's always kind of, I don't know if it supports me or not, but it's more relevant or it kind of supports whoever's right a little more or not if we look at a bigger sample. And it's like, at this point, it's hard to argue that looking at those 4 seasons isn't relevant because it's not like, okay, well, in 3 of those years, they had Buster Posey and now they don't. And so, of course, they're going to be worse. We're talking 3 of the 4 years they didn't have Posey. Granted, one of the years was a 60-game season. One of the years just started. And so when you combine them all, yes, 2021 is a significant chunk of this overall sample. But I also break it down year by year just to show you it's not super high in 2021 and just it's not like they were great in 2021 and then terrible all the rest of the years. And I start 2020. Technically, it's the second season under Farhan Zaidi, the new president of baseball operations. But 2019, come on, I don't want to say give him a pass, but he took over a team that was in a terrible position in every way. They had a bad performing team that was being paid a lot and had a lot of long-term commitments still. Think Cueto, Samardzija, Belt, Crawford, Posey, and those guys weren't performing well at the time. The Giants coming off a 98 loss season, followed by high 80s loss season or not even low 90s loss season in 2018. And so took over a bad spot. That was a bad team. That was an expensive team with a farm system that stunk. So we're not going to really count that first year because there was only so much you could do in year 1. Even counting year 2 is a little bit unfair, but we'll start there because this is when Gabe Kapler came in and this is when the new coaching staff came in, which has just simply made, in my opinion, a profound difference in the overall offensive capabilities of the San Francisco Giants. And so just big picture since 2020 until coming into today, not counting today, weighted runs created plus, not counting pitchers. So in 2021, that was the only year where we had pitchers in the lineups. I don't want to include them in the sample because we're looking at all teams. And if you're including National League teams that had pitchers in the lineups and comparing them to American League teams that didn't, that's unfair. So we're just removing pitchers out of the equation. It's the best way to do it, in my opinion, if we're looking at it this way. But 100 is overall league average offense. And it's not just runs. It's like, it's an all-encompassing offensive metric. It even takes your home ballpark into account. Number 1 is the Dodgers at 16% above average. Number 2 is the Blue Jays, 13% above average. 3 and 4 are the Mets and Astros, 11% above average. 5 and 6, Yankees and Braves, 10% above average. Number 7, the Rays, 9% above average. And then number 8, the San Francisco Giants, 8% above average overall over a parts of 4 season sample here. And so a significant amount of time here where the Giants have consistently been an above average offensive team overall by this metric. Behind the Giants are the Cardinals and White Sox. And I think almost anybody would easily admit that the Dodgers, Blue Jays, Astros, Mets, Braves, Yankees, and Rays are some of the best offensive teams in the game. But then you look at the Giants, who are right there, a tick below the Tampa Bay Rays, and they don't get any respect, even from fans of the Giants. And so it is a little bit odd that that's how it goes. I think there's maybe an overemphasis on batting average in the minds of some, and you're judging them you're putting too much weight on batting average, perhaps, and not enough weight on their ability to hit for power, which, by the way, won them the game today with a couple of big late home runs. And home runs help. They are automatic runs, often more than one run at a time. And anyway, let's go year by year. In 2020, again, short season, but the Giants were 12% above average offensively by weighted runs created plus. In 2021, 107 wins, 13% above average offensively, just about exactly the same as what they did in 2020, when so many people doubted if they could do it again because of the short season. They said, small sample fluke, they can't keep it up. They did. They were about the same, and they won 107 games. 2022, not surprising to see some regression down to a 101 weighted runs created plus, which means just a tick above league average offensively. And then coming into today, again, very small sample, but once again, the Giants checking in at an above average rate at a 106 weighted runs created plus. So add it all up, like I said, it's at 108. And just once again this year, looking like an above average offensive team, even though, admittedly, the strikeouts, the going cold after hot starts in games, scoring some early runs, and then just going ice cold the rest of the way, they've got to figure that out, no doubt. But I don't believe trends like that just linger for 162 games. And I think numbers like this are actually more important. And so we shall see. But the track record, they've not been below average offensive team any of those last 4 years. And I think they got better offensively. They didn't lose many guys offensively in the offseason. And they added a couple guys in Conforto and Haniger who I think could really make a positive impact. We've seen it from Conforto. Haniger is on a rehab assignment. Slater's on his way back. And so there's optimism for the offense. The pitching has been a problem at times. The defense has been surprisingly good. J.D. Davis putting on a clinic, like give him the Gold Glove Award. And he's a guy people expected to not be one of their best defenders at all. And so goes to show you the unpredictability of baseball. And just by the way, before we close, I just want to mention Alex Cobb was really good in this game. 5 innings, 7 hits allowed, but only 1 walk and 8 strikeouts. And then the bullpen got it done today. John Brebbia, an inning in the third, 2 strikeouts, scoreless, hitless. Scott Alexander, a scoreless inning with a K. Tyler Rogers, another scoreless inning and 2/3. Inning and 1/3, still hasn't allowed an earned run. 1 strikeout. And then Camilo Doval with some clutch pitching. I mean, we're talking winning run on third base with 1 out, extra innings and winning run on base, and he got out of it. So huge job. And then Sean Jelly wasn't his best outing, but then Taylor Rogers comes in and closes the door. So A much needed win for the San Francisco Giants as they head home, get on a long flight home. This is not one you would have wanted to lose, and then get on a very unhappy flight home. So that is all the time we have for today. Just a reminder that the Giants play the Mets tomorrow night at 6:40 p.m. And it's a big one. Kodai Senga coming over from Japan. Very interesting pitcher. Right-handed pitcher. Ghost fork, the special pitch. The Giants will be trying to get to him. So catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Everydayers tomorrow on the show will be dipping into some more mailbag questions, so I can't wait to be with you then. Thanks again for listening today. Giants get a win. Go Giants. You are now Locked On Giants.